Hi, my name is KToTheLau. I'm a writer and filmmaker, and now I am a vlogger too. It's bear with me. It's my first time like doing a real vlog like this. I might like look down at my screen sometimes instead of the camera. But anyways, for those of you just not like cyber stalking me, I have a website now where I talk about just the things that I'm working on, and also now creating a monthly newsletter of again, updates of things I'm working on, things that I like, and also just general things of how filmmaking works and how writing works and stuff like that. So if you want to follow me along on that journey, go to my website. Link to that is in the description, and you can subscribe to the newsletter just by submitting your email. And then yeah, it's a monthly thing, so you don't have to worry about your inbox getting flooded. And I'll try to keep things as short as possible. In a way to keep things as short as possible, I also thought about making a companion video for each blog post as well. So for this blog post for February 2025, I am writing about just writing samples because that just a new thing that got added to my website where I just kind of have samples of my work that people can read, like film criticism, essays, Dungeons and Dragons backstories, and stuff like that. Something to kind of showcase like my skill level as a writer for anyone who's interested in hiring me to write. Eventually, short stories, screenplays, and all that will be added as well as they are ready to be available to the public. Right now, I'm kind of keeping it to where like if anyone were to steal those, it doesn't bother me at all. It's all stuff that's just like, yeah, like you could steal it, but like it doesn't benefit you in any way. And then because also these things are also published on other websites that have proof that I wrote it myself. So, in a way to kind of be a companion of that topic of my writing samples, I wanted to talk about some of my favorite books and just books that have influenced me to become a writer and just also strengthened me as a writer. And I thought just were just very impactful to my personality as well. These are all fiction, so sorry for all the nonfiction fans or the fiction haters. This is not the place for you. But for those of you who love fiction, you may see some stuff here that's like, oh, I've seen that before. I read that before. It's just normie taste. And like, yeah, sometimes things are mainstream for good reasons. But I've got some below the radar stuff here too that may interest you. And this is not like an objectively like these are the greatest books ever written because I'm 28 years old. I have not read every book ever written. In fact, I struggle to find time to read as much as I want. Like right now, my minimum goal is 12 books a year, not including comic books. Working in the film industry and climbing the ranks on that, becoming a film producer, and also just wanting to focus on writing more this year. My reading time is staggered a little bit, but I'm trying to make a better effort of it this year. Oh yeah, and another note is that these are all going to be novels. I'm not going to be listing any comic books here. That's going to be for a later video this year because I am working on a comic book right now. So when I'm ready to announce the comic book I'm working on, that's when I'm going to create a video talking about the comic books that I have absolutely loved and felt influenced me as a writer. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. First up, this one's going to be a lot of people know what this is. I mean, maybe it's going to be very telling in for a lot of people of who I am, and if some of people who know who I am and have read this book, they're gonna be like, "Oh, this makes perfect sense." And that is Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is a book that has shaped my entire sense of humor. I read this when I was 12 years old. It was this is kind of like an awakening of literature for me because before I was 12 years old, I mean, I read books like the Magic Tree House series and Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Wally McDougall books because I grew up in a Christian household and went to a Christian grade school for a bit. But yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you don't know what it is a sci fi comedy about this guy, Arthur Dent, who becomes abducted by aliens right before the world is destroyed. So, through his adventure of hitchhiking across the galaxy with his friend who turns out to be an alien hitchhiker, Arthur Dent discovers that the Earth is actually a supercomputer that was built to discover the meaning of life, universe, and everything. But it was destroyed right before calculating the answer in order to make a space highway. It's one of those books that, like, it's not a philosophy book, but it's more of like a satire of philosophy. It is a satire of like political beliefs. It is a satire of like people who think uh it's a satire of nihilism, I guess you could say. It's like, oh, it's like, you know, the things that like feel big end up being minuscule in the grand scheme of things. But it also, through that lens, tells a great story of like, well, if nothing matters, then what truly matters? And that idea is going to come later this year when I talk about my favorite comic books too. Douglas Adams's answer to that question is that if nothing matters in the grand scheme of things, then the only thing that matters is how you choose to live your life. I make it sound deeper than what it actually is, but the subtext is there, and it's a great, funny book. And if you love sci-fi, just wackiness, dude, this is it. It's the alternative kid literature. So the next book I have in the stack, which I actually I should have mentioned beforehand, that it's not stacked in any particular order, other than like making sure that it doesn't fall over right next to me. But yeah, the next I have is actually pretty similar to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and that is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. This is a great American novel. It is an anti-war novel that is also has like a lot of satirical dark humor, similar to Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Basically, Slaughterhouse-Five follows a World War II soldier, Billy Pilgrim, who becomes unstuck in time. By that, it's like it sort of operates like schizophrenia, where his consciousness is like jumps to like different eras of his life, uh, in a way that like it's almost like fake memories, so to speak. But it all feels real. Even like being abducted by aliens and being kept in a zoo, to be studied by those aliens. It is through Billy Pilgrim's journey of being unstuck in time, while also centralizing his consciousness in World War II by being a prisoner of war, and the going and experiencing the bombing of Dresden, and to the point where he has to like dig up corpses as a prisoner of the Nazi party. That, you know, Kurt Vonnegut finds weird, like, it's another nihilism thing. Like, but it's like another positive nihilism thing where it's like, wow, like we as human people are just killing each other. Like we, it's very, it's very timely right now. I mean, unfortunately, I'd say it's timely right now. It's one of those things where unfortunate because of our how humanity is and how the world works. Like it is always going to be timely. But again, it's like this guy is unstuck in time and tries to figure out the meaning of life, and why him? Why was he the chosen one to be unstuck in time? Why was he the chosen one to be abducted by aliens and stuff like that? And it doesn't really provide an answer to this, at least not explicitly. If you go through YouTube and like literary criticism and stuff like that, you'll find many different answers. But like, you know, Crash Course Literature by John Green like kind of gives my favorite reading of it, which is where all being unstuck in time is actually Billy Pilgrim trying to process his PTSD, and the only way he does that is by creating fake memories to mask the pain and of the traumatic experience that he had. Because there's also a lot of correlation between Billy being abducted by aliens and being also a prisoner of war, where the being abducted by the aliens is more of a positive experience for him. He is the chosen one because he is considered to be the best specimen of the male earthling. Like he's in a human zoo where like normally it's similar to like how he was in the prisoner of war. That's a very dehumanizing experience where you're stripped naked and like, and people just kind of like observe you as like an animal. But whereas like, yeah, but like his way of like masking his experience of prisoner of war is imagined by being abducted by aliens, where people are watching him out of like curiosity and admiration and awe. It's like, wow, you're so perfect, you're great, and everything. But yeah, it's that way of masking PTSD through like a potentially schizophrenic diagnosis, that creates an amazing novel. So yeah, Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut, great book. I know some people have like claimed that like it was a required reading for English or college, and they absolutely hated it or like they didn't get it. If you take a look at this book, you're like, wow, I really don't get it. The graphic novel adaptation that came out in 2020 is actually really good. I read it recently and had a friend read it too, because I love the adaptation of it. and he read the comic book version and he absolutely loved it. And we were able to have a very in-depth discussion about the story, even though he has never read the novel. All right, next book on the list. This one's a mainstream. I mean, all three of these have been kind of mainstream so far, but like this one's like super mainstream. Everyone's heard of this, and that is The Shining by Stephen King. Look, man, it's things are mainstream for a reason. Sometimes, because like if something is really good and connects with a lot of people, and it gets very popular through that connection to people, it becomes mainstream. And then that's it. And then like it's not like something that's forced upon by commercialism or anything like that. To an extent. There's some examples where like commercialism is like, oh, we're gonna really push this thing that we believe in, and you gotta watch it. But like it's movies still do that to this day. Books still do that to this day. But yeah, like the legacy of The Shining, which is unfortunately more popular as a movie than a book. They are two very different entities, two very different stories. I am on the side that loves the book and thinks the movie is pretty much okay. But like that's kind of a discussion of which one you experience first. There's people I know that have seen the movie first and hate the book, which I still don't understand that perspective, because I think the movie you can enjoy it and the book separately. Like again, like even though I think the movie is just okay, and I love the book, I can still enjoy the movie as a completely different thing. And that's generally how we should treat adaptations, because it's a different medium. It needs to be able to tell its story in a different way, and then we just kind of judge it based on like whether it's accomplishing what it's trying to do. I think The Shining does the movie the accomplishes what it's trying to do, and I think its craftsmanship is absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's Stanley Kubrick. This guy made 2001: A Space Odyssey. The last 30 minutes of The Shining is amazing. It's so good. But I think, I mean, Kubrick. Every now and then, I think Kubrick kind of gets too lost in the sauce of like what his of his technical prowess, and I think The Shining is kind of the main example of that. Because in the movie of The Shining, there's no real character development that happens. It is this guy is crazy, and then continues to be crazy, and then like kind of until he dies. The Shining book is a very different story. Jack Torrance, the main character, he is a father that and husband that is suffering from addiction. He's suffering from alcoholism mainly, and then also that leads to him having temper tantrums, and to the point where he breaks his son's arm. And like that him breaking his son's arm is a sobering moment for him, realizing that he needs to get his shit together. And then a way to do that is to kind of like go on a sort of vacation where they go to the Overlook Hotel and manage it during its off season. As the story goes on in the book, I mean, and it's sort of similar in the movie too, where it's like there's a supernatural presence there that only the kid can see. What the supernatural presence does, and is also a metaphor for in the book, is the Jack Torrance's temptation. It is also temptations for people as well. It's like for everyone. It's like it's temptations of not just for his alcoholism, but also lust and greed and ego, pride, essentially. Like all the seven of the deadly sins are kind of present in the story as a form of temptation for Jack Torrance, to the point that it really starts consuming him and makes him go absolutely crazy and attempt to kill his family. But the difference between the real big difference between the book and the movie that I think really ties the book together, and this is a huge spoiler. This is the ending. Um, Jack Torrance, at the latest possible moment, realizes that what he is doing is wrong. He realizes that through being lost in his temptations, he is hurting the people that he loves the most. So as a way to protect his family at the last possible moment, he tries to stop the explosion of the Overlook Hotel, and he manages to minimize it, but he has to sacrifice himself in the process. I still haven't read Doctor Sleep yet. I haven't seen the movie yet. At some point, I'm gonna get to it, but like Danny, the kid, and the wife survive the aftermath of The Shining, and then Doctor Sleep is a sequel following Danny about 20 years after that, somewhere around there. It's I don't know exactly the exact gap, but it's a big gap where Danny's an adult, and also like the sins of the father get passed down to the sins of the son. But now he sees spooky ghosts. So yeah, that's I love The Shining. I'm sorry if I spoiled it for you, but it's still worth the read if even if you are spoiled by it because the execution is so great. I mean, I'm also just I love Stephen King's writing, man, and he appears two more times in this stack. I'm actually also reading App Pupil right now. I should be finishing that today, which Stephen King's writing, man, it is the best. He is the goat, as the kids say. Next one up is a pretty if you read modern fantasy, you know this. You know what I'm about to bring out. It's a super mainstream book. That is Mistborn: The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I read this during like 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. Um, I started getting to Brandon Sanderson around 2018, 2019. I started reading Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, which so far is my favorite series from him. But Mistborn, in terms of like influencing my writing, is like incomparable. Sanderson, if you guys don't know, also has a lecture series he puts on his YouTube channel about his creative writing. It's his writing class that he gives at BYU. That class. I mean, just watching it, listening to it, even like watching the new stuff that comes out every year is like it is a gold mine for aspiring writers. Like you learn so much about how to develop plot, character, and themes and world, and making a story satisfying. And Mistborn is the perfect example of everything he lectures in that series in that class put into a book. Like if you're watching the his lectures, you're like, oh, I don't believe this would work. Yeah, this kind of sucks. Like, what does this guy know? Read Mistborn and maybe rethink what you just thought about, or if you said it out loud, think about what you said. Well, Mistborn is a story about it's basically a heist in a high fantasy setting, and and if you're not super into high fantasy like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, this one's much more easier to get into. It is basically it uses a lot of plain language in a good way. Like Brandon Sanderson, his main goal as a storyteller is clarity. He wants to make sure that everyone who reads it can understand what is happening. And like the names aren't super weird. The everything about the world is explained as needed. There's no like overindulgent world building that happens. Like you know as much as you need to know, and you learn it alongside the character because he's also a big author that very much pushes on that exposition needs to be combined with drama. There's a lot of pages to it. I think it's like 700 pages for this copy. 600 pages roughly. Yeah, and then also I got a signed copy too, because I have a few signed copies of his stuff. I love Brandon Sanderson's books. I hope to read more. I'm gonna keep this one spoiler free. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend read it. If you have read it, you know. I've only read this book in this series. There's 7 books right now, and the reason why I haven't moved on from this book because the ending is so good. I was so emotionally satisfied at the end of Mistborn that like I didn't want to move on. I didn't want to see this character struggle anymore. It's like, no, let them be happy. Let them be happy. And this next one is like a generational thing. Like, actually I'm glad Gen Z is kind of like getting into this too. I mean, I guess it just kind of has that appeal to it, but like definitely my generation, like the 90s kids growing up and being, middle teens in like the 2008 era, something like that. But Percy Jackson and the Olympians, specifically the Lightning Thief. I mean, I love the whole series. But The Lightning Thief is, it's the first book of the series, and so naturally, it's the book that really got me into it. And this is the 10th anniversary edition with bonus material inside, including the outline of The Lightning Thief. Crazy. Percy Jackson and the Olympians. You mean I read it when I was 12 years old, so I was perfectly the target demographic for that. I think I started reading it right before the last Olympian, the fifth book and final book of this first series it came out. It's another book that kind of like shaped my sense of humor a bit because Percy's a very sarcastic, snarky kid, and like I just kind of gravitated to that. Rick Riordan really, as the kids say, cooked with this one because it's like the first book it kind of plays as like a mystery novel using the combining Greek mythology with modern world and kind of helping create like a good approachable urban fantasy story that new readers can get into, even reluctant readers can get into because it goes by very quickly. It does a great job of talking about and representing disabilities that kids face even today, like ADHD, anxiety, dyslexia, and stuff like that. It kind of shows like they don't have to be weighing you down all the time. It's all about how you use it. Sometimes it can be really helpful to you. It's not a hindrance. Sometimes there's a whole. I mean, mental illness is a whole complicated topic that still is being discussed to this day. So that it's not so you have to read more than just one book to kind of get the full grasp of it. But the Percy Jackson series is a great series that just doesn't talk down to kids. Like part of like the in-universe explanation is that Percy has a really great relationship with his mom, and his mom never talks down to him. Always treats him as an equal, but also like it's like, hey, listen, kid, like you got to respect your elders and stuff like that. But also like Percy is kind of a free thinker. He grew up to be a free thinker of sorts, and I think encouraging kids that to be a free thinker instead of like completely conforming to things without explanation uh is a great message. And even though it's not like explicitly stated in the series, it is definitely part of the subtext of the entire series because there's also a bit of a anti-establishment themes going on as well about like how the Olympian gods, the Greek gods, have been around and doing the same having the same system for like thousands of years. And Percy, through the events of the series, realizes that maybe the rules need to change. Maybe the rules need to be updated for the modern times. Maybe the system doesn't work, or maybe the system only benefits a select few. So yeah, I mean, like Percy Jackson, I guess you could say is woke if that really bothers you. And if something being woke bothers you, you need to reevaluate what your priorities are. Yeah, so please don't ban Percy Jackson from schools. It is the greatest. It is one of the greatest books a kid could read. I know it's very formative for people even who are not wanting to pursue writing or creativity or anything like that. They just want something good to read. And then yeah, in a world where reading is becoming less popular, people are doing a lot less. Reading comprehension is getting lower, and as these reading skills go lower, the need for media literacy is rising because we are constantly bombarded by media all the time, not just TV shows and movies, but also advertisements and just web content like on YouTube, like we're watching right now. And media literacy is important just for the fact of like learning how to recognize propaganda because with on a platform like YouTube, anyone can say anything without any research whatsoever. And if you don't learn to recognize when someone is talking out of their ass, you are succumbing yourself to being more or less brainwashed. I mean, this sounds super conspiratorial right now. This is supposed to be a book, a video about like, oh, I'm just talking about my favorite book. It's supposed to be nice. Like, no, like this is I have important things to say. I think these are important things to know. So and then I'm very much against banning books for stupid reasons. I mean, like, again, like certain like kids of certain ages, there should be a level of censorship because you don't want to like because like there's like a lot of stories that are morally gray where like you get your best interpretation of it when you understand how morally gray the world is, and like because when you're a kid, you're dealing with a lot of like simple terms of like you grow up with a delusion that like everything has a simple answer to it, and until that delusion is broken, you believe that there's a simple answer to everything, which unfortunately there's not. So yeah, so in a way, yes, like books that are targeted for kids should not be banned. Don't ban books. That's all I got. That's how we got Percy Jackson, a book that I don't think is banned anywhere, except for maybe Christian schools because it is unholy to talk about the Greek mythology or any other religions. Well, actually, the Greek mythology isn't a religion, but like Greek mythology in general, like is considered you unchristian. But yeah, so yeah, don't ban books. All right. Now we're going for something below the radar. Like I would be surprised if someone in the comments is like, I know exactly what this book is. I've read this book, and then they go into like a detailed analysis of it. This is You Must Not Miss by Katrina Lino. Katrina Lino is probably the only author that I follow religiously, I guess you would say. Like literally every time she has a book release, I buy it day one if I don't already pre-order it. And then I just read it as soon as possible. I love Katrina Lino's prose. I think she is an excellent writer. Not all of her stories hit, but at the very least, they are amazing reads. You Must Not Miss is my favorite one of hers. It is a magical realism horror story about a girl who is a victim of sexual assault. But that in the aftermath of that sexual assault, the school, everyone in her school just kind of like shames her, essentially, like treat her like it's her fault and stuff like that. To very I'm trying not to like cause any triggers to happen. But yeah, she ends up hating the experience of the aftermath so much, and that she wants to get revenge, and her feelings of revenge manifest a creature from another world to help her enact that revenge. So yeah, it is a sexual assault revenge story. That's part of the reason why I like it, because I think it's like in a young adult novel. This is probably like 16 and up. I think this is a topic that like needs to be talked about with nuance, and I think this does a really good job of like how to talk about it with nuance. And at the end of the day, it's also just a very chilling read. It is like if you're like, man, I wish there was like a girl version of Stephen King. Katrina Lino is kind of that person for me. All right, next one up. It's another kids book. This one might be in the middle of like mainstream and below the radar. I think it just kind of depends on your region. But I know there's been like a movie with a pretty stacked cast about it. I think the movie is just okay, but that is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, with inspired by a story by Shaban Dowd. Uh, A Monster Calls is a very, very heavy kids book. It's ages 12 and up, but it basically talks about the death of a family member and learning to be okay with that. It is going through the 5 stages of grief. So it's another magical realism book where a monster goes up to this kid's house and says, "I'm going to tell you 3 stories, and the fourth story has to be a story you tell." And through its own structure, it talks about the power of stories and what it is able to influence. In an old podcast I did, Committed Critics, we have an episode about Monster Calls. I highly recommend listening to that episode if you want to know more about it. But I'm just gonna leave it there because I already saw that. I'm like, oh, I'm about half an hour into this video that I thought was going to be like a 15-minute video. So yeah, that's Monster Calls. only $12 if you buy it brand new, and it's like you can read it in like 3 hours. Like there's a lot of pictures in it, and the text has like wide margins, so like you can. It's super quick read, and it's super like it's so good. It is a low risk, high reward read. Definitely give it a read. All right, so sometimes people ask me, "Hey, Kevin, what is your favorite book?" And that's when my mind suddenly stops working because I have read lots of books, including comic books. I think I have 500 books logged on Goodreads. I think a little over 200 of those are novels. But there's one book that I have reread more than any other book, and by that I mean I have read this 3 times. The only other book that I've read close to that is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I've read 2 times. And but yeah, so this is like my default answer if someone were to ask me, "What's your favorite book?" And I'm scared to have this as my default answer, but it's true. Like it's a book that I will read this any day of the week. It's just a lot of fun. And that is Spider-Man: The Darkest Hours by Jim Butcher. And I know some of you are probably like, "Wow, if this is Kevin's favorite book, he must be a normie dumbass." Because who in the right mind would read a Spider-Man book and be as smart as a person that reads classic literature? Hey, listen, I read classic literature too. I love Great Gatsby. I love Frankenstein. I literally have Slaughterhouse-Five over there, man. Like that's don't don't discount me because this is my favorite book. No, I highly recommend reading this book if you're a Spider-Man fan. It is a first-person Spider-Man novel from the guy that writes the Dresden Files. Dresden Files is like another series I absolutely love. But the voice, like Jim Butcher writing Peter Parker is just perfect, man. It's like the voice just works, the characters just works, the plot just works. Like it is about the inheritors, which it was hinted at in Beyond the Spider-Verse. So if you want to get a little bit ahead of the curve of Spider-Verse while you're waiting for the next movie to show up, Spider-Man: The Darkest Hours is the way to go, in my opinion. It's the most. I think it's much easier to get into than the Spider-Verse comic. The Spider-Verse comic is kind of like a little because of Marvel editorial. Like the book itself is a little all over the place, and it's also like in the middle of like a huge arc that's happening in the mainline Spider-Man universe. So yeah, if you want to learn more about the inheritors, the vampire multiverse beings that hunt animal totems, the Spider-Man: The Darkest Hours is the way to go. It's a very quick read too. It's very fun. I love it. And this is also set during the time where Peter and MJ are married. So if you want to have that experience after reading like the current Ultimate Spider-Man run by Jonathan Hickman, like this is a solid one, guys. This there's a reason why this is my favorite book. It's just so much fun to read. Yeah, there's a lot of young adult and children's stuff here, and this next book is no different. This is a book that is actually banned in schools. I think also Slaughterhouse-Five is banned in some schools too. But this one here is Looking for Alaska by John Green. I'm trying to make sure there's no glare on this. But yeah, this was not my first John Green novel. My first John Green novel was The Fault in Our Stars, and I absolutely love that. But Looking for Alaska, I love the most from him. Looking for Alaska is a very amazing coming of age story about just learning I don't, just learning to respect women. Like that's kind of like view women as people. That's a very important lesson that I think more guys should learn. And it's also like I don't know. There's also again media literacy is super important because I know there's a lot of people that have read this book or you've seen the show and walk away with the wrong mindset where it's like it's like, "Oh, yeah, like, Alaska Young is, like, my hero, that's who I am." No, Alaska Young is a very disturbed person, that needs help, and sexualizing these people like her is part of the problem, of why what's mentally hurting them. But, yeah, the reason why this is banned in a lot of schools is because again, the sexualization of some people, like how the main character sexualizes women sometimes. There's also a pseudo explicit sex scene for that only lasts like a page. That's like not even like pornographic at all. It's just or tantalizing. It's like very like very matter of fact of what happens, and it still has a great message on sex and intimacy, and how it should be treated even as a teenager. So, yeah, don't ban this from schools, man. Stop banning books. You know who else banned books? Nazis. Nazis banned books. So never don't ban books. We got two left. I'll try to keep this as fast as possible. So next book is a lesser known Stephen King book. It is, and I wouldn't say it's like a favorite Stephen King book either. But it is a Stephen King book that it was just one of those experiences where I was a different person when the book ended. Like that book changed something in me that I may not be able to fully describe, but it was a change nonetheless. And that is Revival. It's one of his newer books. And yeah, again, lesser known, like it hasn't been adapted for a movie or anything like that. But it's not even like it's not really a horror book either. Like it's more of a drama about this guy who tries to enter the music industry back in like the late 1900s. But like and there is like a horror twist at towards the end and stuff like that. It's very very chilling. It does end on a scary note, but you follow this guy's life from childhood to adulthood, and it feels so real. The way King creates this character just feels so real that like it's like you're reading a memoir. And like the audiobook of this too is also really good. So like if you're trying to read this book, you're like, this sounds kind of boring. I highly recommend the audiobook because the narrator of that like really makes it all feel real. I don't want to spoil this, man. This is good. Like I just read it. It's a good one. It's also a short one. It's one of King Shorter's books, like 400 pages. And yeah, like the text, there's not too many words on the page. So book talk people might be okay with it. All right, last one. This I would say this is the book that made me realize what writing was. This was like, oh, this is what writing can be. This is what books can be. There's a movie version of this in my life that I will talk about next month. So of like the movie that made me realize what filmmaking was. But I'm gonna talk about that next month. But right now, the book that made me realize what writing was my first Stephen King novel as well. That is Under the Dome. You can see I have the CBS television. Yeah, there we go. It's mirrored. The now a CBS television series event. The TV cover version. The TV show absolutely sucks. Don't watch the show. I remember like seeing trailers for the show because I was at the time I was watching Person of Interest on CBS. And then like trailers for the show started coming out. I was like, wow, that looks pretty interesting. I'll check it out. I like the Simpsons movie. Like a lot of these young adult books that I talked about, I read them as an adult. I kind of skipped young adult when I was in my young adult phase. Like I read Percy Jackson, and then after that, I walked around by the young adult section of my library, and like even though I tried to read Hunger Games, I tried to read just any random like Divergent, like any random popular book that was in young adult, and I just didn't like the writing style because young adult books, any given young adult book that doesn't like consider amazing or anything like that, usually is written like a screenplay almost, where it's almost like just entirely dialogue based, and it's boring. I'm like, yeah, I might as well just be reading a screenplay. So I went to the adult section. I decided like, oh yeah, I've heard the name Stephen King before, and like yeah, like again, I can't remember if I said it, but I was 14 years old, going walking around the adult section of my library. I was like, oh, let's check out this Stephen King guy because I've heard the name floating around so much. And then I kind of was like, oh, Under the Dome. I saw a trailer for this TV show. Like, I'll give it a shot. And like, and like long books don't scare me. Like I had read Inkheart, the trilogy. I've read so many long books. Heroes of Olympus is also pretty long as well. So yeah, like I'm no stranger to long books. So I was like, oh yeah, 1,000 pages, like that's cool, that's awesome. I'm gonna get a lot of time out of this one. Yeah, I wouldn't say no. This is no. I don't. It's not that I wouldn't say this. Definitely is not one of King's best books. I think I want to reread it to reevaluate it, but I think from based on my memory of it, I would probably give it like a 3.5 or 4 out of 5. But to me, as a 14-year-old experiencing his first Stephen King book, like this is whoa, 5 out of 5, amazing. This is what writing is. Like this is like because the way King writes, there's so much detail, sensory details, that really immerse you into the story. And also with it being an omniscient POV, King actually has like there's a chapter in this book where King is like literally having this weird spirit guide the audience from one perspective to the next of what is going on during one night. um it was that one, like it altered my brain chemistry, man. I was like, what the hell? So yeah, I mean, like here's the thing, like if you are unfamiliar with Stephen King, and you're willing to give long books a shot, I mean, Under the Dome, it's not a bad choice. I mean, another book I highly recommend is 11/22/63, which has a great Hulu show adaptation as well. But yeah, this one does not have a good adaptation. This is the best way to experience this story. I mean, the ending isn't like the greatest, but I don't know. I'm just kind of flipping through it now. It's like, yeah, the word again, not too many words on the page. Book talkers should be okay with this. I'm sorry, I'm bashing on book talk so much, but like I have opinions. Again, I think you can probably tell that Stephen King is my favorite writer, by the mere fact that I chose 3 of his books here. Even though, yeah, again with Katrina Lino, like she's the only writer that I read religiously because she releases books. I got into her when she released her first book, and then so I was able to like it was pretty easy to kind of follow along with like a release from her that was every 1 or 2 years. So like yeah, and like it's young adult, so it's short. But yeah, Stephen King, like I'm trying to read more Stephen King as I've only read 15 of his like 60 or 70 books or something like that. But yeah, no, Stephen King's my favorite author, man. He writes books in a way where I close the book thinking, man, I hope to one day write something that good. In terms of novels, in terms of movies, his screenwriting could use some work. His movie opinions could use some work. But goddamn, he's a great novelist. But yeah, that is my little first vlog about the books that inspired me to be a writer and just some of my favorite books in general. If you want to read some of my writing samples, feel free to go to my website in the description. There's a whole drop down menu on the top navigation bar. Currently, as of this video, there's Dungeons and Dragons backstory, there are essays, and there are film reviews. Eventually, again, there's going to be short stories, novels, samples, comic book scripts, and just screenplays in general. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hit subscribe to be notified when the next video comes out. And also subscribe to my newsletter to see when the next blog post comes out. There's going to be a lot of stuff rolling out this year. Films that I produce. I'm trying to get a short off the ground right now. I'm trying to get a comic book off the ground and maybe even a movie off the ground too. But there's just a lot of content I have rolling out this year, which encouraged me to finally get a website together and do monthly posts talking about what is releasing each month. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. I will see you at end of March.